And then my role has just continued to expand and expand and expand. And here I am today as a head producer of all 10 shows. Every minute that I'm around and I'm by my computer working, essentially, or on my phone working, it asks a lot of me between the two jobs. Yeah, especially since COVID, the walls kind of broke down and the lines blurred. If I don't want work to leak into everything in my life, I have to make Gedarm. Life in general, you can't make a pure system and always keep to it because there are variables that are completely out of your control. And if you try to control everything, it ends up driving you crazy because you're not in control.
Shalom Aleichem and welcome to Shtark Tank. Shtark Tank is a podcast about the challenges and opportunities of being a Ben Torah in the workforce. Before we begin, a quick personal request to please take a few seconds, hit that subscribe button, leave a 5-star review. It really helps us reach new listeners and grow the show, so thank you so much for that. This week, we're joined by Yoni Schwartz. Yoni is a good friend, also my cousin. He's the head of data science at Exponential. He's the head producer at Living L'Chaim, which some of you may have heard of, maybe the biggest network of podcasts in the Jewish world. I just made that up, but maybe it's true. You'll confirm in a second. And lately, he's also the host of the Spirit of the Song podcast. So how does he do all this? That's the topic that we're going to get into today. Yoni, thank you so much for joining us and welcome.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it. I don't know I'm not making any claims. We like to say that we're probably the largest Jewish YouTube channel, but either way, Baruch Hashem, we reach a lot of people.
Amazing. So let's try to get into it. I think the first place to start is with your career as a data analyst, a data expert. Tell us how you chose that career and what your sort of first role was.
Sure. So when I was in YU, we were, comes a time that everyone needs to kind of decide where they're going. I knew business was probably more up my alley, and both the combination of my brother already having gone through the major plus just having an affinity for numbers, but also with people, it kind of felt like data analytics felt like the right fit. And, turned out it very much spoke to me and found myself going down that route. And then as I was wrapping up YU and looking for a full-time job, like any good Jew, you look around shul, and I spotted someone, a neighbor of mine who I knew, and I was kind of just chatting and mentioned I'm studying data analytics, some of the tools I was using, and he said, "Oh, I run the data team at this ginormous health insurance company. So why don't you send me your resume and I'll push you for an interview?" So I ended up working as an analyst for an insurance company for 6 years, and then pivoted a few months ago. I was looking for something much faster, more interesting, more useful, using my tools, and I found myself at a startup, which has been
we're going to talk about that journey a little more. So why don't we shift for a second and talk about Living L'Chaim, how you end up involved over there?
Sure. So 3 or 4 years ago, I was already a couple years into this insurance job. I had time on my hands. I was mainly working from home. It was the nature of the job was get your work done. And so I was getting my work done in a couple hours a day, and I kind of found myself with some extra time. I also wasn't incredibly happy at the job. It was where I needed to be at the time due to, needing to have a little more flexible career while my wife was in school. And so I was casually looking for something. I knew I couldn't really switch jobs, but I wanted to do something with my time. Consulting, I wasn't really sure. And kind of on a whim, I saw a post online about Living L'Chaim's growth. And I've always been interested in social media, YouTube analytics, Google analytics I've been trained in. So I was like, hey, why don't I reach out? And I messaged Yaakov Langer, who's the founder, who's the CEO. And I said, hey, listen, I love what you're building. I'm a consumer of your shows myself. And I think, here are a couple of suggestions. I try to provide value. And I said, here's a couple of suggestions that I think can improve your show. And I'd love to just lend a hand and see how I can help. And that first conversation turned into a second, turned into a third, turned into me doing one job for them, another job for them. And then my role has just continued to expand and expand and expand. And here I am today as a head producer of all 10 shows.
Wow, that's really incredible. The 10 shows that you're happy to run all those things while you're doing a full-time job. You're doing sort of, sounds like 2 full-time jobs. So let's just go back to that moment. Then you're at this corporate job, you're working a full-time job, but getting it all done in like 4 hours a day. Like, did your boss, your management, your leadership know that that was the case, that people are able to finish what they're being paid full-time to do in just a few short hours? How did that work?
So it's a good question. I didn't formally have a conversation. My actually, that being said, my manager did know that I did have a second job. They were aware. I spoke about it, and I was open about it, and I would make sure that it wasn't coming at a cost to my primary job. I knew that that was my employer, and this was kind of like my secondary, my chesed almost. And I said, make sure not to have it affect my work. So I was able to do the divide, um, and in a way that felt comfortable and felt natural and didn't feel like I was stealing from my employer or anything like that. I was very conscious not to cross those lines.
I guess what I meant to say by that question, I'll ask it in a bit of a different way, is that there is a stereotype that people in certain corporate areas are not doing anything super productive. They're not really so happy. They're clocking in, they're clocking out. They're cogs in a big machine. They're getting nice paychecks, but not really feeling they're doing anything with their time. Was that something that you sensed was a prevalent idea that people were aware of and talking about, or was it just you and the team that was feeling that way?
So I certainly feel that way. I certainly felt that way in a very big way. And I wouldn't say I was fully depressed, but I definitely did feel a complete lack of purpose. And they were paying my paycheck, and I was doing work for them. But it didn't feel in any way meaningful. It didn't feel like I was growing my career in a way that felt like, okay, like I'm plugging away, but this is going towards something. It kind of felt into the void. I didn't talk about it with my peers. It wasn't the type that I was talking about with my colleagues per se, but certainly with friends that I spoke to, in my personal life, I've heard that sentiment, more than a few times.
And it's really amazing how you were able to find that outlet to find more meaning in your life. Talk a little bit more about how it sort of filled you up with meaning and purpose that you weren't getting from your work.
Yeah. So first off, I wouldn't say, it's anything to pat my own back over. It was hashkacha pratis. Like there's no no two ways around it. But yeah, it was something that I did that every step of the way feels like I'm doing something for the cloud. For most of my time there, I didn't take a dime. I just was like, hey, let me get involved. And after getting involved and kind of, meeting the people there, it went from it was such a contrast to where my primary job, felt stiff and felt like, okay, I'm doing my work, I'm plugging away at that computer, and that's it. And you wouldn't even see the payrolls. You wouldn't necessarily see, the impact of what you did. And it was the exact opposite, where first off, I was working with people who, I mean, I still love. They are amazing people. They are fully in it for the clout, and it's not like, hey, we're running a business and in the process are making some nice podcasts. It's like, hey, we're looking to make money so that we can produce more podcasts, so that we can help the cloud. Like we have our two primary shows. One is about just inspirational people and telling those stories, and we've gotten so much feedback of people saying, hey, this like really impacted me in a deep way. I chose to be makabel something upon myself because of this. I was in a tough place and this really brought me out. Like so much feedback that mamish have changed lives, that just became such a draw and such a, almost a fix for me, of seeing the impact that we could have. Then, we have Kosher Money, which is like a personal finances show, and the amount of feedback we receive on a weekly basis of people saying, hey, thank you so much. We never had a personal finances class or education at any point, and my finances has been a wreck. And like you helped me figure it out and feel so much more menuchas hanefesh, that I'm not going off the deep end and going into debt. And this has really given me a hold of things, that just like those alone, not to mention the mental health podcasts and the other things that we also focus on. And then a whole second side of things, I wasn't even thinking about this, but I'll bring it up because it's relevant. October 8th happened, the day after October 7th, 2023. Horrible tragedy. We literally, I'm sitting beside myself, can't move away from my phone. I'm staring at everything. I can't stop reading. Mamish, on the verge of tears. And, the group chat starts going off, and I think maybe Yaakov Linger even called me, and he said, what now? Like, what are we doing about this? Like, what can we do? And, I'm talking to him and we're like, hey, you know, there's a lot of news channels. There's a lot of people covering this that are going to, you know, be there on the ground. They can provide much better news updates. And that's not where we fit in here. But like, we're living a time, our show, our name literally means to live, meaning inspired. Why don't we try to find, some positive things coming out of Klal Yisrael, coming out of Eretz Yisrael during the war? So we hired people, and everyone on the team went full in, said, scour online, scour social media, scour WhatsApp, find whatever positive, uplifting videos that you can possibly find, whether it's soldiers singing on the battlefield, Klal Yisrael being mechazik each other in tragic moments, and let's try to share that online. Fast forward a year and a half later, you know, those videos just on YouTube alone have been viewed 750, 800 million times. Across the world, people are seeing Israel in a new lens. And just, the concept of that, of being able to be, part of a group that's putting good out into the world, like I said, filled that void for me, like, entirely, and some.
So I want to ask you a question about October 8th in a moment, but before that, you spoke about the thrill of being involved, and I'm curious, like, for me, through this podcast, I've gotten involved in a lot of things, and I'm very happy and enjoy it. But I was never like the guy in yeshiva, like, just to be involved in lots of things for the sake of being involved. It was like I found this something which I found very meaningful, and then got involved, and it was nice to be involved. But it wasn't like I was never involved in things just for the sake of being involved in them. For you, is it similar, or were you also like a guy in yeshiva who was like involved in a lot of different things?
I don't entirely understand exactly that type. It's not who I am. I'm not trying to, like, fill up my plate and then some. But things that speak to me, I'm drawn to.
So with regards to October 8th, you mentioned the niche that Living L'Chaim found and was able to cover. I'm curious now how you see that space. Some have said that in certain slices of the American Orthodox world, things have sort of gone back to October 6th, just like, business as usual. I don't know. You're much more on the ground, so I'm wondering how you see it.
It's a complicated question, and it involves overgeneralization that I cannot do.
I want to hear the insights from the data of Living L'Chaim, you two.
I see a lot of Klal Yisrael still, for sure, on this side of the world, still trying to figure out what they can do, how they can help. It obviously looks very different than supporting the war with money on the battlefield, per se. But I don't think there's a single person, a single Jew anywhere in this world that hasn't changed anything about their life because of October 7th and the aftermath. So I think people are still looking for it. I'll tell you this, like, specifically with Inspiration for the Nation, we've had this chus of having on a couple of hostages for full length podcasts. We did one we did an interview with Eli Sharabi in front of 1,000 people in the Young Israel Woodmere, and then put it online. And I think 3 interviews with hostages that have happened in the last, maybe 7, 8 months. They're 3 of our top 4 most watched videos. People are still craving the stories. Eli Sharabi's book. Now there's another book coming out that are bestsellers immediately. People are still craving the stories. People still want to hear the, Mimam Makim, Krasich Hashem, these people who are mamish in the lowest place, where it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense that they survived, but not only did they survive, they clung to Hashem. They met, like, that just moves a person. That changes a person. We did a video for Tisha B'Av this past year. We put together Tisha B'Av videos typically, and we put one together with different people that were affected by the war in a very significant way. A spouse who lost her husband in the battle, a child who lost his father, a father who lost his son, and a few others, including a Gomberger. And we were trying to figure out, like, do we do we want to help these people. Do we do a fundraiser for them? Do we, what should we do? So we kind of, we settled on the fact that like, we don't want it. One of our mottos is that we refuse to have people pay for things on a fundamental belief basis. We want to make the content free. So we get advertisers, things like that. So for this, we said we don't want people to feel like it's a requirement that they have to pay to watch this video. So we said we're going to put out the video at the end. We'll say if anyone wants to donate, let us know. Immediately, we got a call saying someone wants to give $10,000 to each person. On top of that, I was expecting it to not really go anywhere. It raised, in just the 24 hours of Tishrei, it raised over $60,000. People still feel compelled and feel moved by the stories and feel, okay, maybe I can't be in Eretz Yisrael this moment, but what can I do? How can I help? Who can I lift up? I still see that as very much a belief.
Okay, so you mentioned how you got into this whole world of living l'chaim to fill a gap in your schedule and in your mind and in your heart at this corporate job. So let's fast forward, because you said that you did transition out of that to a job which is very, very different. So tell us a little bit about the startup life, A, and then B, how you're able to continue with living l'chaim, although your job is very different.
Yeah. So like I said, I was in that corporate job for a while and was generally unhappy. Finally, my personal life shifted, so I was able to maybe look for something else. It happened to be that I saw someone working at the startup, a founder of the startup that I knew, and I reached out to, and it worked out. And I was very nervous about taking the role, and I understood that the startup life looks very different and requires you to really jump in, and it's a roller coaster. You'll, as opposed to feeling like what I do doesn't really matter. Now it's like everything I do very much matters, and you're always needed, and there's always more that you can be doing, and it's a entirely different job, and it's a roller coaster. Every time you feel like the company took one step forward, everyone's on a high, and the moment maybe you lose a client and you take one step back, everyone's like depressed. It really fluctuates, and so it's hard, but it also speaks to me so much more. Seeing your Maaseh Yadayim is so much speaks to me so much more, and it requires a lot from me. It especially like you said, like between the two jobs now, it's pretty much every day and night, and every minute that I'm around, and I'm by my computer working essentially, or on my phone working. It asks a lot of me between the two jobs, but again, part of it is a mentality of, hey, I'm 29. I'm currently in the process of the grind, trying to figure out, what's with my career, where can I go, what skills can I learn, how can I make myself of value. Part of it is mentality and saying, hey, right now, like, this is where I want to be. And also, yeah, I asked myself, okay, when I go to the startup world, do I want to pull back from living l'chaim or something like that? And I'm like, no, like, it gives me chiyas. Like, I want to make it work. And I recognize, okay, if I want to make it work, it means sometimes, staying up at midnight, I'm listening to the latest episode that's going to be released on Motzei Shabbos because I still need to make edits to it. Like, that's part of the cheshbon. But again, it's a cheshbon that I make willingly.
So again, now that you're working at a much busier job, can you take us through like what a general day looks like, that you have these two very busy roles, big responsibilities on your shoulders? How are you making time for both?
Yeah, so I mean, the nature of it is my primary job, Exponential, is I'm sitting at a computer. I have multiple screens up. I'm working on in a database. I'm pushing things live to the front end. I'm, working with other members of the team. I have meetings, things like that. That is, primary where I'm at. Living the Chaim works much more off of WhatsApp. So I have my phone next to me, and things could be happening. Typically, a lot of like the video editing and things like that, I'm doing. The big work that requires, an hour or two of my focus, I'm not doing during the day. If it's quick answering a WhatsApp, a quick, crunching the numbers, a quick 3-minute call to an advertiser, I'll take in the middle of the day. But typically that is more after hours, and after hours. Some nights I am opening up Exponential and doing, an hour or two of work there, depending on what's on my plate. But nights are more living l'chaim focused, but it's an ebb and a flow. Sometimes there's more work to be done on one end, sometimes there's more work to be done on the other end. It's a balancing act.
Right. It's interesting. I was to a shir on Parshas Vayetze, it was Past Shabbos, about work ethics, and Yaakov Avinu, the Rambam talks about how dedicated he was to his job. And I politely raised my hand and said, like, the norm today is that everything is so not specified. So on the one hand, yeah, we'll take a call from our spouse or a friend during the workday, but we'll also answer a message from our boss during the night. So like, on the one hand, you could view it as like maybe a step back, that people are not fully focused during the hours that they're being paid to work. But on the other hand, it's sort of like a give and take, and it's somewhat accepted in today's society that that's just how we do it.
Yeah, especially since COVID, the walls kind of broke down and the lines blurred. And it's now taking an active effort for people to put away their phones when their kids are around, and doing and making certain cheshbonos, saying, hey, if I don't want work to leak into everything in my life, I have to make gedarim. So I think that's very important. And I think there's now being that pushback where, like, I think right after COVID, like, people didn't really know how to balance that, and work totally bled into real world and family life. And now people are, trying to push back on that and figure out how we can set up better gedarim there for
Right. Yeah.
learning, for family time, for all that stuff.
Yeah, it's certainly a challenge. And one thing that I've tried to do is, I don't do this every day, but I try most days when I, get home, which is for supper and bedtime, to leave my phone in the car and then only go back and get it after the kids are asleep. Do you have certain routines that you try to stick to keep some sense of balance?
When I started the workforce, that's what it was. When I left YU, um, and I'm married and trying to figure out, trying to balance, life, working, family time, all that stuff. And I'm like, how can I, how do I make this work? One of the first cheshbonos I made was, hey, nights, things come up. When I was young and 22, 23 and just starting out, we had weddings all the time. During wedding season, I had weddings 2, 3 nights a week, or maybe family was getting together, or whatever, nights ended up, or date night with your wife, like, it just ended up being busy. And I made the cheshbon very early on. I'm going to learn in the mornings. You know, Night Seder felt like it's going to end up being only 3 times a week. Maybe some weeks it will be 2 times a week. It just felt like that was more like things could come up, where morning Seder or learning early morning pre-shacharis felt like nothing's really doing then. So I joined the kollel that met at 5:30 before shacharis, and I said, hey, that way nothing's going on. Everyone's sleeping nowadays. My kids maybe aren't always sleeping at 5:30, but either way, that's been a cheshbon that I made. I was in a kollel in the Heights, and then during COVID over Zoom for 4 years, and then now I'm in a kollel in Bergenfield. Same 5:45 pre-shacharis, get together, share once a week. Like, feel like you're a part of something kavua, learning that isn't going to be infringed upon. So that was one gather that is very important to me. And then certainly, gedarim around family time is very important. A similar thing, trying to put the phone down. It's hard. It's very hard sometimes, especially when things are going on at work, to do that. But trying to be present and draw a line that this is family time, not phone time, is extremely valuable.
And you did mention that you're 29, you have little kids at home, and you alluded to this, but I was curious, throughout the recent years, if you could give us approximately like how often you end up having to miss that 5:45 kollel due to the kids can be either up at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or all of the above.
Yeah, you gotta be realistic. You gotta be normal. I applaud people who are able to say, you know, never miss a day, no matter what. It happens. The baby wakes up at 4. My wife is works very hard. So to get, to say, hey, okay, make that cheshbon and say, hey, okay, this morning I'll miss call, or missing the alarm. It happens. You go to bed late. It happens. So, I would say, out of 5 days, 3, 4 days a week. 4 days a week is pretty typical. It
Very
happens
nice.
some weeks 5, some weeks 3, but you try your best, and that's all you can do, and that's all the Ribono Shalom wants.
And I'm trying to think, like, your schedule is so busy, you have little kids at home, you don't seem to like manage your time with any like systems. It's really just about the passion that you have for the projects that you're doing that keeps you going. Is that like a correct read of things?
Yeah, the type of person I am by nature. I don't think, if I tried to be super systemic about it, it wouldn't work. I feel in general, life in general, you can't make a pure system and always keep to it because there are variables that are completely out of your control. And if you try to control everything, it ends up driving you crazy because you're not in control. But as my Rebbe says, Rav Yaakov Neuberger, he spoke at a recent Vad, and he said, as long as you're intentional, then you're good. Meaning, he said it's possible that you don't learn for a number of days in a row, maybe even a couple of weeks. But as long as you're intentional, meaning you can say, okay, now is I'm choosing to do family time. Now I'm choosing to maybe it's to just relax and sit on the couch because that's what your body needs. You don't have anything in you. And if you try to push yourself and go to the base measures, then the next day you're going to be completely shot and you're going to, drop the ball on something important. So but all that you need to do, all that you have to focus on yourself is be intentional. Make that choice. Hey, I'm choosing to do this now for that reason. And as long as you're intentional, I think that's the ikker. Because when the time comes, you'll be intentional for the let's say for the base measure. So okay, for a few days, I'm taking the cheshbon. I'm dafka choosing to lay low to spend this extra time with my kids. Take my son to the Yankee game. But I know that when I have the energy, when I have the right machshavos, I'm gonna be in the right place.
Right. I mean, that's very interesting because obviously, the Rambam and Chazal talk so highly about the importance of kavana, and it could really create a reality where you're doing all these different things, but they can all be shifted in a certain direction, a certain goal, and certain mindset on the one hand. On the other hand, with, life so busy and me personally, your head can be spinning from so many things. So could be your head is spinning from family, and family is already like a good value, but it's also could be spinning from work, and work is already a little bit less of a religious value. And then, so like, being intentional is not always easy. Your head is not always clear and thinking, even like I was, share openly that this morning during Shacharis, first thing in the morning, my head was completely spinning about work stuff. I was completely not there. So do you have any sort of tips that you found to help yourself be actually intentional?
No, no. There's no answer to it. It's a part of life. There will be times that you're not able to. There will be times that you really wanted to. All the time I go through the motions, have a full day at work, then spend multiple hours with my kids when they come home from school, put them to bed, and I have every intention of going back to my desk and then going to Ma'ariv and then going to Chabur after Ma'ariv and then spending a few minutes with my wife, and like I'm like, great, perfect night. And then I leave that room, I close the door, and I'm ready to go do work, and I'm just like, I have nothing in me. And I'm like, I'm not being intentional. I'm just saying I need to sit, and then an hour goes by, and I'm like, what happened? It happens. This is life, and I'll be the first to admit I'm not always good at this, but forgiving yourself and saying, okay, that happened. Now what? Focusing on what's next, I think is a very important nikuda, and not getting hung up on it, because you get hung up on it and you beat yourself up, and then you're just putting yourself in a worse place.
Right. It's so interesting because like life is really so busy and it comes back so fast. And just, I guess, finding those moments to, it may not always expected or planned, to be able to stop and think or to stop and enjoy a moment with the kids. That's not, getting them along the assembly line to their next stop in the day. It can be very precious.
Yeah, very much so.
I want to just, before I want to talk about the last Living L'chaim topic, as far as your role as producer. As I mentioned before, you're now hosting a podcast about Jewish music. So you can tell us a little about why you are passionate about that particular project.
I love Jewish music. I'm a big music junkie for a long time. Um, it kind of came about naturally. I'm I'm perfectly happy being on the back end. I don't need to be in front of the camera. But we had a music show already hosted by a tremendous Rebbe singer. You know, he already had all the connections. He came up with the concept of the show. But his Rav Donnie Kunstler is his name. He's a Rebbe in Shraga. And he built out this whole show, and it originally started as a WhatsApp group, and then it grew much larger and bigger. And people really enjoyed hearing machshavos about a song. about, okay, here's a popular song that I love singing. I appreciate it. I like the words. But hearing the behind the scenes gives it a little more hargasha. So you know, I was a fan. It's a great show, but Ravdani just became too busy. It ended up being that he was chasing after people, and it wasn't. He said, I'm okay if you want to find a new host. That sounds great. And we ended up sitting dormant for maybe 7-8 months. And then, we were having on a couple of singers on the show and things like that on the main show, Inspiration for the Nation. We were having singers on, and they were doing quite well. People really were interested in hearing more from the singers. So we were talking about maybe bringing it back. And I said, listen, if you want, I can try my best to host. I'm happy to. I know a thing or two about the songs, and I do the research naturally. So I'm happy to host. And yeah, so we kicked it off. We did an episode with Naftali Kempa when he released his album a few weeks ago. We have a couple of more things in the works, and we'll see. Hopefully, people enjoy.
So we'll link to that in the show notes, and highly recommend all the Jewish music fans in the audience definitely go and check that out if they haven't already, because everyone knows about Living L'Chaim and all of their wonderful shows. But if they haven't yet heard of this particular one, remind us what it's called and how we find it.
Spirit of the Song. It's available Spotify, Apple, 24/6. I don't know, most of the podcast platforms.
Okay. A few other questions about sort of hashkafic topics that relate to your transition to being a bentor in the workforce. I don't think we've ever talked about this in the 102 episodes so far, but you made a switch in the clothes that you wear as you neared your time in the workforce. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I don't really draw attention to it. I don't talk about it really at all. But my last year in YU, I recognized I was already married. I was already, it was clear to me that it was going to be my last year full time learning. A lot of guys, either going to smicha in YU, or many guys, especially in certain professions like accounting, end up the way that it is, that they can stay in learning for another year or a couple years, whatever it is. Happened to be, as much as I would have liked to, the writing was on the wall that I should that I'm going to go work after the year's done. And I wanted to kind of say, hey, like, I want to take this year a little more seriously. In addition to changing my lavush, I was on the cross country team, and I loved running. But I also made the cheshbon where I was like, listen, if I run, then I wake up really early in the morning. I end up like running. I have 3 minutes to shower. I get to chakras maybe a couple minutes late, which leads to me having to eat breakfast after chakras, which means me getting to Seder late. And I'm just like, that's not the tone I want to set for the last year in the base medrash. So I ended up saying, okay, let me make a few changes in my life. One of them being that I was going to wear, the kind of universal dress code for B'nai Yeshiva, even if it's not the universal dress code of YU. I said, let me just do it to when I look in the mirror, maybe I'll take myself a little more seriously. And so I did, and I kept that up. And then when it was also easier to get dressed in the morning. And then when I graduated YU, it was also around the time, I think it was around the time that Rav Lopiansky put out his Sefer Ben Torah for Life, which very much resonated with me. Uh, and I kind of said, now that I'm out of yeshiva, maybe it's all the more reason to continue wearing the lavush of a ben yeshiva. That maybe it's appropriate to, even though I am working, to remind myself that I'm still at my core. What speaks to me is learning, and where I would have loved to be is in the base medrash. Yeah, I really haven't thought about it much, and haven't, in the sense that I haven't been like, oh, look at me, I'm still wearing white and black. It's like, no, okay, this is what I wear, and now it's second nature.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I appreciate the sentiment that you were like looking at your time yeshiva coming to an end. You're making this big transition. To what extent do you think that was like a big influence on what actually ended up happening many years later versus continuously finding new sources of inspiration and real connection and maybe less external things?
Yeah, I don't think it's too much, but in general, self-perception is very important, and one change in how you perceive yourself, whether externally or internally, has a snowball effect. So I don't know how much it plays a role in my day to day, but I do think that how I perceive myself definitely subconsciously plays a factor.
Okay, let's talk a little bit more about your Rebbe. You referenced him before and his chizuk about being intentional. Rav Leibowitz a few weeks ago told us to focus more on the connection between a Balabas and his Rebbe, and you certainly have a very important kesher with Rabbi Neuberger. Can you tell us a little bit more about um, why Rav Neuberger is such an important part of your life?
Yeah, so Neuberger was my Rebbe. I was in his shir for 3 years when I was in YU. And then Baruch Hashem, I developed quite a kesher. He was my Masada Kedushin. He was the sandik at my son's bris. Um, he provided a lot of hadracha to me, and just because I left his shir, I didn't want that kesher to end. I still spoke to him regularly, asked him shilos when he was available. He's a very busy man. He's both a Rosh Shiva and a Mar Dasra, so he has a full plate and then some, and he's involved in countless organizations and people's lives. So it's hard to reach him, but made an effort to continue that kesher, because I once heard him say, when I used to live in Teaneck apartments, and they were putting together a shul nearby, primarily by young guys for young guys, and one of the important things that Rav Neuberger said is very very makpeh that you should have a rav. It shouldn't be that it's community run kind of thing. And when Rav Neuberger came to speak, they invited him to speak once, and he said that when people move to communities, they should really inquire and meet the Rav and speak to him, because the Rav of your shul is going to be the Rav who's you're hearing every Shabbos, who's the one that is imparting messages in you, is the one that if you have shilos, you're most likely going to ask both halacha and hadracha, and not like that should be an important factor of deciding where you're going to move, is related to who the Rav is, and if you relate to them, and that should be an important cheshbon, which is definitely was part of the reason why I said, hey, let me consider moving close to the shul. And that's where I live now, so that now I'm able to attend his chaburas, I attend his vadim. I continue to get hadracha and etza from him. And that's a beautiful thing. I think a person should, especially if they feel like maybe something is lacking in their hashkafa and in their spiritual life, I think you should really chesh one out. Number one, do I have a Rebbe? Number two, when was the last time I spoke to my Rebbe? When was the last time I heard shir by my Rebbe? Cultivating that kesher is a big part of that part of you, that piece inside your neshama that does need to be cultivated.
It's interesting how you described his approach of inquiring about the rabbi, and you also spoke about your side of cultivating it on your end. And asel harav is that you are supposed to be the one who's cultivating the Rebbe relationship and making sure that it's there for you. To what extent do you think it's important that there always has to be some sort of connection and relationship, but like the mindset that you have, this is going to be my Rebbe, I'm going to seek his advice, I'm going to listen to him as much as I can, versus, when I find the right Rebbe who serves me in the exact ways that I want, then he'll be my Rebbe. But otherwise, like, it's a more passive approach. To what extent do you think that is important, that the Balabas and the Talmud make it into a proper relationship and not wait for it to come to him?
Tell you a story that's semi-related. I was in Beis Shemesh for Shabbos when I was in yeshiva with a number of my friends, and we
Are you
went to
staying at
go
my
hear,
house?
maybe, probably, and we went to go hear Rosner speak, and then afterwards we were walking. There's like a hill up, I think. We were walking up a hill, and we saw Rav Rosner leaving, walking with his father, and one of my friends remembered that he had a question, and he started running down the hill. Rosner, Rosner. And I call him back. I'm like, what are you doing? Like, come back. Like, the shear's over. We already left. He's walking with his father. Like, let him go. And my friend, Ephraim Tepler, he stopped me, and he said, what are you doing? Like, let him go. I'm like, he's bothering Rav Rosner. Like, he's with his father. Let him be. And he's like, no, you bother Talmidei Chacham. Like, your job is to build that kesher. Like, their job is to impart Torah and to inspire. And like, that's the dynamic here. Like it's okay if you pursue and go after Talmidei Chachamim. So it was, this is 10 years ago and it still lives in my head. So I'm not giving people the eitzah of going to bother Talmidei Chachamim and calling your Rav at every hour of the night, but it's on you. It's on you. Your kesher will go, especially Rabbanim like Nuremberger, who's so incredibly, compromise is the wrong word, but he spread thin with his time. The kesher is only going to go as far as you can put in, because the Rav can only put in so much time into. He has a number of congregants, he has a number of talmidim, and then he has former talmidim, and then each year he's getting new talmidim. So the kesher is on you. Don't wait for your Rebbe to reach out to you. Reach out to your Rebbe, and you'll see the relationship flourish.
So we spoke about your sort of career. We spoke about your journey to live in L'chaim. We spoke about your dress code, your connection with your Rebbe. Let's talk a little about your financial approach. Being someone who's so involved in living L'chaim and Kosher Money, you're behind the scenes, choosing topics, choosing questions. So I'm sure some of that has some rubbing off effect on you. So you tell us a little bit about what are some of the main things that you've learned from being involved in the Kosher Money podcast that you've applied in your life?
So remember how we spoke about earlier, where you said to me, you asked how are you able, do you have a system in your life? And I'm like, no, you can't really have a system. Throw all that out the window when you're talking about finances. I think a lot of people have the mentality that, okay, wishy-washy, systems trump intelligence. You can be really smart and make a lot of money, but if you don't have, control and systems on top of it, it will end up imploding on you. Where Ellie Langer, the host, often talks about the quiet millionaires. It's an idea from Dave Ramsey, where the people in boring jobs but are able to budget really well and have have a hold on everything, and they're able to put away money every year into the stock market, watch it steadily grow, and they'll become millionaires in much greater quantities than those who flip a quick million and then lose a quick million. And the people that, do it like that, okay, there will be some that find tremendous success, but many, many, many more millionaires are made in the trenches, so to speak. That being mindful, being smart, those who don't have a budgeting app, if you're not using any, a tool online, and there are a number of them, you're just doing yourself a disservice. If you don't have life insurance, if you don't have, if you haven't actually thought about health insurance and you just take whatever is thrown your way, you're throwing money out the window, and it's hard. The sugya we're discussing is how there's not enough time in the day, and then you throw in, managing bills and checks and all that stuff. And people are going to say, where's the time for it? But we did a study. I spearheaded a study under the Kosher Money brand at the end of 2024. We did a survey of 3,300 from families to understand a little bit more about your classic from finance. And whatever, if you're talking to the analyst, the data scientist in me, there are some biases and flaws in the system, so it's not a perfect study. But nonetheless, we learned that 30 to 40% from families are in some sort of debt. And that was eye-opening, where we knew the number was high. We're aware of people calling in, but that's an alarming number in general from finances. They don't add up. They don't make sense. We went last year I went with Ellie Langer to Tennessee. We interviewed Dave Ramsey, and it was our second round interviewing him. So one of the primary questions after our first round interviewing him was the numbers don't add up. How does it make sense? Because he has a whole mahalach, and we're like, now take your whole mahalach and add a 30% extra for Jewish tuition. How does that make sense? And he said, he's like, it doesn't. And that's what you have to accept. Where if you understand that this is a priority for us, and we won't cave on Jewish schooling, that is a non-negotiable, then, and only then, once you accept the fact that the numbers don't add up, do you then focus on, okay, how do I make this work? How do I, how can I make the numbers add up? But getting back to my original point, the same way where like the way to diet, the way to lose weight is to do a combination of dieting and working out. If you only work out and you don't change your eating habits at all, maybe if you work out tremendously hard and go into it in like an unhealthy way, like perhaps you will still lose that weight, but then the moment you stop, you'll put all that weight back on. But if you do a healthy mix of both eating well and working out, that's how you kind of make a change in your body. So the same thing with financial wealth, where like you can both work harder towards making a larger salary and be on top of budgeting and make sure that everything is, again, the theme of the day, cheshbon out, where everything's going to the right place. The same way where if you focus all your efforts into pouring your time into work and working all hours every day, all day, and working harder and making that bigger income, maybe you'll see that change where everything feels stable for a bit, but you lose your job. You get for whatever reason, you don't make the same income the next year. If you don't have the budgeting piece of it, you're wrecked. So having tools and systems in place and being very disciplined will lead to a lot more comfort in your finances.
The term I believe you used from Dave Ramsey was the invisible millionaires, right? The quiet millionaires who are build their wealth quiet.
Yeah.
Who build their wealth in the trenches, not fancy, nothing fancy. It reminded me of another term, which I believe I heard from Morgan Housel, where I think he calls them the rich and anonymous, which is like the best quadrant to be in, which is that you have enough money, but people don't necessarily identify you as rich. The reason why that's so important is because if you have a lot of money, but you're seen by your peers as someone who has a lot of money, so there's certain expectations of you. There's another term, I think, like a social debt or something like that, where, you're a rich guy, so you're expected to do certain things, whether it's philanthropy or making certain events or a certain house. So I'm wondering how you see that from community. It's obviously a big, big challenge, but being able to have the stability, have the numbers adding up, but not allowing that to bring with it more expenses, more expectations that you're going to be doing more and more, and be able to create a better balance.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, and I think at the core of it, it's the number one problem we have in the financial elements of our community, where the keeping up with the Jones, keeping up with the Schwartzes, whatever you want to call it, where the fact that the Jewish communities are built the way they are makes it so that the person who's being supported by the Kupas Ha'ir, right, the local charities, lives next door to the millionaire, lives next door to the Gvir. So they go to the same school, they go to the same shul. One of their names is on the plaque. One of their father's names is the donor, and the other one doesn't have their name there, but they're part of the same institutions. They play in each other's backyards. It doesn't exist much outside of our communities, but the nature that it's built and around shuls and things like that makes it so that it's very, very easy to look at the person next to you. You see what they're driving, you see what they eat, what they wear, etc. And human nature, people forget, like it's not a chisaron, it's human nature to look at the person next to you. Use it as a gauge. It's the data that you're bringing into your brain as to what's considered making it, what's considered normal. That standard of living keeps rising, and people keep thinking, the bar is now that my Shabbos table needs to have all of this stuff. And, whatever, Rabbanim talk about it, where it's like, all right, the kid says, what do you mean we're not going to Florida for winter vacation, right? Whatever, classic things that people say, but it's real. It's real. It might look different for different age, different demographics, different location, but it's real everywhere you look because it's human nature. So training yourself not to get caught up in that is the biggest tova. It's the biggest thing you could do for yourself, in giving yourself the menuchas hanefesh of, it's okay. All my friends are buying a house. Okay, it's okay that I'm renting. I'm okay with that. I'm where I'm supposed to be. Hashem has, provided to me what I need in this moment. And, it's clearly related to emunah and bitachon, where if you're able to work on that muscle of trying not to look at your friend or not getting caught up in that, like, you're doing yourself some big favors.
I have two follow-up questions on that. You can answer whichever one you prefer, or both if you'd like. Number one is, on a broad level, do you see signs of a pendulum swinging back from that thrust of keeping up with the judges into something whether it's younger guys or other people who are leading a back shift in a more positive, simple direction? And number two, personally, if you have any like tips that you've discovered to help you apply this idea in your own life.
Yeah, there are ways that we're seeing small shifts. We did an episode once with Jeremy Weeder from YU, and he came out very strongly in one of like these clips that ended up going viral on like, why do you need to drive a nice car? Like, just like, why? And it resonated with people, and people started writing into us. It ended up starting to be like a little bit of a trend where like people were like saying like, I drive this, and like showing off that they're driving a 2001 Toyota Camry. Like people are buying into it more, and I've seen a couple of more. There's like a weekly advertiser in Mishpacha and Ami that focuses on calling out all this, keeping up with the cones or whatever you want to label it as. And I do think people are waking up to this phenomenon. For sure, it's still there and prevalent, but I think people are coming to it more. And in terms of Eitzah for how to work on that muscle, to flex that muscle, it's talking about it. It's talking about it with your wife at home and making sure that you're on the same page there. It's talking about it at the Shabbos table, and just like, the more you talk about it, the more ridiculousness of it sounds. I think most people can catch themselves if they spend the whole Shabbos meal, instead of singing Zmiros and talking Divrei Torah and things like that, they're instead talking about what the other people in the community are doing. At some point people will realize this is ridiculous. But the more you do talk about that, like, okay, I'm happy, Sameach b'chalko, the more that muscle gets flexed.
Okay, Yoni, this has been a fascinating conversation, a lot of interesting ideas and stories, and so thank you for sharing that. Let's go to our lightning round. 3 short questions, 3 hopefully short answers. We're in the winter. We have nice, long Friday nights. What do you like to do at that time?
Have a nice meal with my kids, read a little bit, maybe learn a little bit, and go to sleep.
Amazing. And when you preparing for Shabbos, preparing for Parshas Shavua, is there one sefer you like to go to that gives you some inspiration, some insight, some enjoyment of your learning?
Changes on the year. Right now I'm reading Rav Yechezkel Weinfeld. He's a Rav in Ramat Eshkol. He's a kollel. His stuff is phenomenal.
I'm not familiar. What's the style?
One of his Talmidim wrote down his Divrei Torah in English. It's a couple of short ideas each week, but his ha'aros are very deep and complex.
Okay, and if you were forced to quit your job as a data analyst, quit your job which you love so much, living l'chaim, choose something new, something you dreamed about doing as a kid that you had to throw yourself into, what would that be?
Like right now, the answer would be to keep going living l'chaim. I mean, that's within the framework. I'm trying to think outside of that. I have no idea.
All
I'll
right.
get back on it.
All right, Yoni, thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. I
Wanted
highly recommend everyone go to Living L'Chaim, check out all their amazing podcasts, especially Spirit of the Song, hosted by Yoni Schwartz. Thank you so much. And by the way, we should have done this in the beginning. Yoni's been a great resource for me with all of his podcasting knowledge. A lot of the wonderful parts of Shtark Tank are to his credit. So thank you for that. Thank you for all of your help along the way. And thank you for doing this episode today.
Thank you, Yaakov. Appreciate it.